I am Zachary. I'm 32 years old, and my stepmother just looked me dead in the eye and told me I was getting absolutely nothing from my father's $70 million estate. She smiled when she said it. But before I tell you about the moment the lawyer started laughing and changed everything, let me know where you guys are watching from in the comments. I read every single one. The conference room at Sterling and Associates smelled like old money. It was a scent of mahogany, lemon polish, and leather that had been curing since before I was born. I sat on one side of the massive oak table, my hands folded in my lap, staring at the grain of the wood. I was wearing a suit I'd bought off the rack 3 years ago for a friend's wedding. It was a little tight in the shoulders and the fabric was starting to shine at the elbows, but it was black, and it was respectful. That's all that mattered. Across from me, it looked like a runway show for the morally bankrupt. My stepmother, Elena, was holding court. She was 55 but fought tooth and nail to look 30, thanks to a plastic surgeon who was probably on her speed dial. She was wearing a black dress, but it wasn't a morning dress. It was a cocktail dress, something you'd wear to a gala where you expected to be the center of attention. Next to her was Brad, her golden child, my stepbrother. He was 25, slouching in his chair, tapping furiously on his phone. He was wearing sunglasses indoors. And then there was Tiffany, 22 years old and already looking bored with the concept of grief. She was flipping through a travel brochure for the Maldives, not even trying to hide it. "I'm telling you, Mom," Brad said, his voice loud enough to cut through the heavy silence of the room. "The red one. The dealership in Beverly Hills said they'd hold it until Friday, but we need to move funds today. The black interior is nice, but the red pops." "We will handle it, sweetie," Elena said, patting his hand. Her nails were long, manicured into sharp talons, painted a blood red that matched her lipstick. "Let's just get the formalities out of the way. Mr. Harrison is always so slow with these things." "I'm thinking a penthouse in Tribeca," Tiffany chimed in, not looking up from her brochure. "Or maybe Soho. I need space for a studio. And a view. I can't be creative without a view." I tightened my grip on my own hands until my knuckles turned white. They were carving up my father's life before his body was even cold in the ground. It had been 4 days since the funeral. A spectacle Elena had turned into a networking event for the city's elite, and they were already spending money they didn't have in their hands yet. Elena looked over at me then. Her eyes were like ice chips. There was no warmth, no shared sorrow, just pure, unadulterated venom. "I hope you didn't take time off work for this, Zachary," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern that barely covered the sneer underneath. "I know how precious hourly wages are to people in your position. I worked as a project manager for a construction firm. It was honest work, hard work, something Brad wouldn't know if it hit him in the face with a shovel." "I'm fine, Elena," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm just here to hear Dad's final wishes." "His wishes?" she scoffed, a short, sharp sound like a bark. "Robert made his wishes very clear to me. We updated everything 6 years ago. Right after the wedding. He wanted to ensure the estate stayed with the family that actually cared for him. The immediate family." She put a heavy emphasis on immediate. The implication was clear. I was history. I was the relic of a past life, the son of a woman who died 20 years ago, a ghost haunting her perfect new kingdom. I didn't take the bait. I remembered the last conversation I'd had with my father. I remembered the way his hand, frail and shaking, had gripped mine. "Patience, Zach," he had whispered. "Promise me. No matter what they say, no matter how much they hurt you, you wait. You let them show who they are." I had promised. So I sat there, swallowed my anger, and let them think they had one. "He couldn't even call you, could he?" Brad sneered, looking up from his phone. "When he was sick, who was there?" "Mom, you were probably too busy playing in the dirt at your construction sites." I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted metallic tang. They knew exactly why I hadn't been there. They knew because they were the ones who had barred the doors. "Mr. Harrison will see you now," the receptionist said, stepping into the room. She looked nervous. She refused to make eye contact with Elena. We filed into the inner sanctum. Mr. Harrison was sitting behind his desk. He was a mountain of a man even in his late 60s. He had been my father's lawyer for 40 years, and his friend for longer than that. He had bounced me on his knee when I was a toddler. Usually, Mr. Harrison was the picture of stoic professionalism. But today, there was something different about him. His face was flushed. His eyes were bright, almost wet. He was arranging folders on his desk with precise, deliberate movements, but I could see a tremor in his hands. "Please sit," Harrison said. His voice was thick. Elena took the chair directly in front of the desk, claiming the position of power. Brad and Tiffany flanked her. I took the chair in the corner, near the window. "Let's make this quick, Jonathan," Elena said, crossing her legs. "We have appointments this afternoon. Just read the part where I get everything. Give us the access codes to the accounts and we can all go home." Harrison looked at her over the rim of his reading glasses. "Condolences, first of all, on the loss of Robert. He was a titan of industry and a good man." Yes, very sad." Elena waved her hand dismissively. "He's in a better place. Now the inheritance." Harrison cleared his throat. He picked up a document. "I have here the last will and testament of Robert Sterling, dated 6 years ago. See?" Elena shot a triumphant look at me. "I told you. 6 years ago. Dated 6 years ago," Harrison repeated. "However." "There is no however," Elena interrupted. "We drafted that will together. It leaves the entire estate to me, with stipulations for Tyler and Tiffany's college fund and living expenses. And it specifically excludes Zachary Sterling." She turned her entire body toward me, savoring the moment. "You get nothing, Zachary. Not a penny. Not the house, not the cars, not even those old books you wanted. I made sure of it. 6 years of marriage, and I finally got Robert to see sense about his ungrateful, distant son." The room went dead silent. Brad snickered. "Sucks to be you, bro." I felt a cold hollowness in my chest. Even though I knew my father, hearing those words, that he had signed a paper cutting me out, it hurt, felt like a physical blow. Elena leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with cruelty. "You're not in the will. You're out. You're nothing." Harrison looked down at the paper. Then he looked at Elena. And then, he did something I had never seen a lawyer do in a setting like this. He started to chuckle. It wasn't a polite cough. It started low in his chest, a rumble of suppressed mirth, and then it bubbled up. He put a hand over his mouth to stop it, but he couldn't. The chuckle turned into a full-blown laugh. A deep, booming, genuine laugh that echoed off the mahogany walls. He laughed until he had to take off his glasses and wipe tears from his eyes. Elena's face went from smug to confused, and then to furious. "How dare you?" she screeched. "My husband is dead. This is a solemn occasion. Why are you laughing?" Harrison took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, but a rogue giggle still escaped. He looked at me, gave me a small, almost imperceptible wink, and then turned his gaze back to Elena. "I apologize, Mrs. Sterling," Harrison gasped, wiping his eyes with a silk handkerchief. "It was unprofessional. But you just have such a vivid imagination." "Excuse me?" Elena stood up, her hands slamming onto the desk. "You really don't know, do you?" Harrison said, his voice suddenly dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. "You really think a piece of paper from 6 years ago is the end of the story?" "It is the only story," Elena shouted. "Oh, Elena," Harrison said softly, "you played a very good game. But you forgot one thing. Robert Sterling didn't build an empire by being blind. And he certainly didn't leave his legacy unprotected." The sound of Mr. Harrison's laughter seemed to unlock something in my brain. Suddenly, the sterile office faded, and I was pulled back into the suffocating memories of the last 6 years. It was like a movie reel playing in fast forward, showing exactly how we had arrived at this moment of absolute toxicity. I remembered the day Elena moved in. I was 26 then, already living on my own, but I visited Dad every Sunday for dinner. The house, my mother's house, had always been warm. It was filled with soft yellows, comfortable furniture, and the smell of baking bread. Within a month of Elena's arrival, the house turned into a museum. The warmth was replaced by cold marble, sharp angles, and white furniture you were terrified to sit on. Elena didn't just redecorate the house. She redecorated my father's life. The first casualty was Maria. Maria had been our housekeeper since I was born. She wasn't staff. She was family. She was the one who held me when my mom died. She was the one who made sure Dad ate when he was too depressed to cook. I remember coming over for dinner one Sunday and finding Maria crying on the front steps, a box of her things in her lap. "She fired me, Zach," Maria had sobbed, her small body shaking. "She said I was stealing silver. I never took a thing in 30 years. Your father, he just stood there. He looked so tired, Zach. He didn't say anything." I had stormed inside, ready to go to war. I found Dad in his study, staring out the window. He looked smaller, older than his years. "Dad, you can't let her do this," I had pleaded. "It's Maria. It's just for the best, son," Dad had said, his voice hollow. "Elena needs to feel comfortable. She needs to run the house her way. Please, I don't want to fight." That was the pattern. Dad, a man who had negotiated million-dollar contracts and stared down union strikes, crumbled before Elena's emotional terrorism. He chose peace over justice because he was lonely, and he was terrified of being alone again. Then came the isolation. Slowly, Dad's friends stopped coming around. His golf buddies told me Elena made them feel unwelcome, criticizing their clothes, their jokes, their politics. Then it was the phone calls. Every time I called the landline, Elena answered. "He's resting," she would say. Or, "He's having a bad day, Zachary. Don't upset him." It got worse when the diagnosis came. Parkinson's, complicated by heart failure. It was a slow, cruel sentence. And Elena became the warden. I wasn't a son anymore. I was a security threat. "You upset him," Elena told me one afternoon when I tried to visit. She blocked the doorway with her body, Brad standing behind her like a bouncer. "Every time you leave, his blood pressure spikes. The doctor said no visitors." "I'm not a visitor. I'm his son," I had shouted, feeling the helplessness rising in my throat like bile. "You're a stressor," she spat back. "Go away, or I'll call the police for trespassing." I stood there, looking up at the window of my father's bedroom. I knew he was in there. I wondered if he thought I had abandoned him. I wondered if Elena was telling him I was too busy, too selfish to come. But they didn't know about Thomas. Thomas was the head gardener. He was 60 years old, grumpy, and loyal to the bone. He hated Elena because she had tried to make him pave over my mother's rose garden to put in a meditation deck. 2 months before Dad died, Thomas found me waiting in my car down the street. He tapped on the window. "Gate code is 4492, he grunted. "Back door will be unlocked tonight at 2 a.m. Nurse Grace is on shift. She hates the witch too." That night, I crept into my own childhood home like a thief. The house was silent. I tiptoed up the stairs, avoiding the creaky step I had memorized as a teenager sneaking out to parties. When I entered Dad's room, I expected to see a vegetable. That's what Elena had told everyone. "Robert is gone mentally," she would say at her luncheons. "He doesn't even know who I am." But when I sat by the bed, Dad's eyes snapped open. They were clear. Tired, yes. Pain-filled, yes. But clear. "Zach," he whispered. "I'm here, Dad," I choked out, grabbing his hand. "I tried to come sooner. She wouldn't let me." "I know," he rasped. He squeezed my hand, and his grip was surprisingly strong. "She tells me you don't care. She tells me you're waiting for me to die so you can sell the company." "You know that's a lie," I said. "I know," he said. He pulled me closer. "Listen to me. This is important. Are they treating you well? Elena? The kids? Does it matter?" I asked. "It matters," he insisted. "I need to know. Have they shown you any kindness? Any at all?" I looked at my dying father, and I couldn't lie. "No, Dad. They treat me like dirt. They treat everyone like dirt." They're spending your money on cars and vacations while you're lying here. Dad closed his eyes. A tear leaked out. But when he opened them again, there was a steeliness I hadn't seen in years. The old Robert Sterling was back. Good, he said. It was a strange thing to say. I needed to be sure. I gave them every chance, Zach. 6 years. I gave them every chance to be decent human beings. Dad, we can fight the will, I said. I can get a lawyer. No, he hissed. No fighting. Not yet. You promise me, Zach. You let them play their hand. You let them think they've won. You take every insult, every slight. Let them reveal exactly who they are to the world. Can you do that for me? Why? Because the trap only works if the prey thinks it's safe, he whispered. Harrison knows. Talk to Harrison when I'm gone. Until then, silence. We sat there for an hour. We didn't talk about money or wills. We talked about Mom. We talked about the fishing trips we used to take. We said goodbye. I left before dawn. That was the last time I saw him alive. When the call came that he had passed, Elena didn't even call me herself. She had her assistant do it. And at the funeral, she put on a performance worthy of an Oscar, draped in black lace, clinging to Brad for support, while I stood alone at the back, watching the circus. Snap back to the present. Mr. Harrison was wiping his glasses. Elena was fuming. The memory of that secret night gave me strength. Dad hadn't been weak. He had been waiting. And now the wait was over. Mr. Harrison finally settled down. The red flush of amusement was still on his cheeks, but his eyes were sharp as flint now. He placed his hands flat on the desk. Mrs. Sterling, Harrison said, his voice calm, you are correct about one thing. There is a last will and testament from 6 years ago. It essentially disinherits Zachary and leaves the bulk of the estate to you. Elena smirked, smoothing her skirt. Exactly. So why are we wasting time? I have a real estate agent waiting for me. We're listing the Hamptons house. However, Harrison continued, ignoring her, you seem to be under a significant misunderstanding about how Robert structured his assets. Do you know what a trust is, Mrs. Sterling? Elena rolled her eyes. Of course I do. It's a bank account for rich people. Stop patronizing me. Not quite, Harrison said. A will commands where assets go after death. But a trust owns the assets while you are alive. And if a trust owns the house, the car, and the bank account, then the will has no power over them. The will can't give away what Robert didn't personally own. What are you babbling about? Brad interrupted, taking off his sunglasses. He looked annoyed. Dad owned everything. His name was on the checks. His name was on the checks as the trustee, Harrison corrected. But here is where it gets interesting. Robert established the Sterling Family Revocable Trust 25 years ago. It was the basket that held everything he built. And he changed it, Elena snapped. He changed it when we got married. He made me the beneficiary. He did, Harrison nodded. For a while. But you see, the thing about a revocable trust is that, well, it's revocable, can be changed, amended, or replaced entirely. Harrison opened a new folder. It was thick. He pulled out a document stamped with official seals. This, Harrison said, tapping the paper, is the restated Sterling Family Trust, executed 15 months ago. It completely replaces any previous versions. It was signed, notarized, and filed perfectly. Elena laughed nervously. That's impossible. Robert didn't sign anything 15 months ago. I was with him every day. I monitored his mail. I monitored his visitors. You monitored his front door, Harrison said. You didn't monitor his late-night cognitive clarity. And you certainly didn't monitor the private notary who came in via the garden entrance. I watched Elena's face. The color was starting to drain out of it, leaving her foundation looking like a mask of yellow clay. He was sick, she shouted. He wasn't in his right mind. If he signed anything, it was under duress. Or he was confused. I'll sue. I'll have it thrown out. You can't prove he knew what he was doing. We'll get to his mental state in a moment, Harrison said. his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. But first, you need to understand the mechanics of what happened. You see, when Robert restated this trust 15 months ago, he did something very specific. He resigned as trustee. So, Brad asked, what does that mean? It means he stopped controlling the money, I said. Everyone turned to look at me. It was the first time I had spoken in 10 minutes. My voice was calm, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Exactly, Zachary. Harrison smiled at me. He resigned, and he appointed a new trustee. And that new trustee immediately exercised their power to transfer ownership of the assets. Who? Elena whispered. Her hands were shaking now. Who is the trustee? Harrison pointed a thick finger at me. Zachary, Harrison said. Elena looked at me like I had just grown a second head. Him? He's a construction worker. He doesn't know anything about finance. Zachary has been the sole trustee of the Sterling estate for the last 15 months, Harrison declared. But that's not the punchline, Elena. The punchline is the beneficiary designation. Harrison picked up a single sheet of paper and slid it across the table toward Elena. The trust is an irrevocable trust now, Harrison explained. Designed to avoid probate. Designed to be ironclad. And upon the moment of Robert's resignation as trustee, which was 15 months ago, the trust dictated that all assets were to be legally titled to the sole beneficiary immediately. Who is the beneficiary? Tiffany asked, her voice trembling. She had finally put down the travel brochure. Zachary, Harrison said. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. You could hear the traffic 40 floors down. I don't understand, Elena stammered. What are you saying? I'm saying, Harrison leaned forward, that Robert didn't leave Zachary money in his will. Robert gave Zachary everything before he died. The house you were sleeping in? It belongs to Zachary. The car Brad drove here? It belongs to Zachary. The accounts you have been using your credit cards against? They are funded by Zachary. That's a lie. Brad stood up, his face red. I checked the bank balance yesterday. There's $3 million in the checking account. Yes, Harrison said, because Zachary let it stay there. He let you spend it. Why? Elena whispered, looking at me with horror. Why would you do that? I finally stood up. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city my father had helped build. Then I turned back to face them. Because Dad wanted to see if you would change, I said. He wanted to give you one last year. He told me, Zach, if they treat me with kindness, if they treat you with respect, we can share it. If Elena takes care of me because she loves me, not because she wants a payout, then we will take care of her. I walked closer to the table, looming over them. So I waited, I said. I watched. I watched you fire Maria after 30 years. I watched you cut off Dad's friends. I watched you, Brad, charge a $40,000 Rolex to the corporate card while Dad was in the ICU. I watched you, Tiffany, skip visiting him on his birthday because you had a Coachella ticket. I can explain, Brad stuttered, hiding his wrist behind his back. And you, Elena, I looked at her. I watched you treat my dying father like a burden, an inconvenience that wouldn't die fast enough. We were married, Elena shrieked, finding her voice again. I have rights, spousal support. You can't just cut me out. This is financial abuse. Financial abuse? Harrison laughed again, though this time it was a dark, angry sound. Let's talk about abuse, shall we? The atmosphere in the room had shifted from shock to a primal panic. The golden child, Brad, looked like he was about to vomit. Tiffany was frantically texting someone, probably her boyfriend, realizing her ticket to the high life was burning up. Let's look at the numbers, Harrison said, opening a ledger. Since the date of transfer 15 months ago, the trust, which I remind you, is Zachary's property, has paid out $2.4 million in expenses related to the three of you. We have a lifestyle to maintain, Elena argued, though her voice was thinner now. Robert wanted us to live well. Did he want you to spend $50,000 on a spiritual retreat in Sedona while he was in the hospital? Harrison asked, raising an eyebrow. Did he want Brad to draw a consultant salary of $10,000 a month from the company for a job he never showed up to? Did he want Tiffany to drain the emergency college fund for a trip to Ibiza? That was my money, Brad shouted. I'm his son. Stepson, I corrected. And no, it wasn't your money. It was mine. Every swipe of that card for the last year. That was theft. Grand larceny, actually, given the amounts. Brad slumped back in his chair. The word larceny hung in the air. This is ridiculous. Elena spat, trying to regain control. You can't prove any of this ownership. The deeds are in Robert's name. Actually, Harrison pulled out a stack of photocopies. The deeds were transferred to the ZS Trust last year. You just never checked the county recorder's office. You were too busy shopping. But I have power of attorney. Elena grasped at straws. Power of attorney ends at death, Harrison said simply. And it only applies to assets the person owns. Robert died owning almost nothing personally. He was a pauper on paper. Everything was already in the trust. The realization hit Elena like a physical slap. She had spent 6 years waiting for a payday, enduring a sick husband, playing the role of the devoted wife, only to find out she had been guarding an empty vault. You tricked me, she hissed at me. You and that old bastard tricked me. Don't you dare call him that, I said, my voice low. He was smarter than you. You thought because he was sick, he was stupid. You thought because I was quiet, I was weak. I want a forensic audit, Elena screamed. I want to see the medical records. Robert was mentally incompetent. I know he was. He forgot names. He mixed up dates. There is no way a judge will believe he had the capacity to sign away $70 million to you. She pointed a manicured finger at me. You coerced him. Undue influence. That's what this is. I will sue you for everything. I will tie this estate up in court for 10 years. You won't see a dime. Harrison sighed. He looked tired of her noise. We anticipated this, Elena. Robert knew you would claim insanity. He knew you would try to drag his name through the mud to get a payout. Harrison reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a sealed envelope. On the day Robert signed the restated trust, Harrison said, he didn't just see a notary. He saw Dr. Evans. You know Dr. Evans? The leading geriatric neurologist in the state. Elena paled. He went to a doctor? He underwent a full 4-hour cognitive evaluation, Harrison said. MRI, verbal testing, memory recall. Do you want to know the score? Harrison slid the report across the table. He scored a 29 out of 30. The man was sharper than I am. The report concludes unequivocally that Robert Sterling was of sound mind, fully understood the extent of his assets, and was making decisions of his own free will. Elena stared at the report. She didn't touch it. It was like kryptonite. But wait, Harrison said. There's more. We also videotaped the signing. Would you like to watch it? We have a video of Robert explaining exactly why he was cutting you out. He lists the dates you screamed at him. He lists the times you neglected him. He speaks very clearly. Elena looked trapped. She looked at the door, measuring the distance. You can't do this to us? Tiffany cried out, crocodile tears finally flowing. Where are we supposed to live? That house is our home. It's Zachary's house, Harrison said. But we're family, Tiffany wailed. Zach, come on. We grew up together. You moved in when you were 16, Tiffany, I said coldly. And you spent the last 6 years telling everyone at your private school that I was the gardener's assistant, because you were embarrassed of my blue-collar job. Don't play the family card now. We are not leaving, Elena declared, crossing her arms. Possession is 9/10 of the law. You'll have to evict us. And in this state, that takes months. Maybe years. She smirked again. A flicker of her old arrogance returned. She thought she had found a loophole. She thought she could squat in my mansion and make my life hell. I expected you to say that, I said. And honestly, if it was just about the money, I might have let you stay a few weeks. I might have given you a grace period. I reached into my own jacket pocket. But then, I said, Dad told me to open the black file. I pulled out a plain black folder. It wasn't legal-sized. It was thinner. What is that? Brad asked, eyeing it nervously. Dad hired a private investigator 3 years ago, I said. He wanted to know where all the cash withdrawals were going. He wanted to know why his wife disappeared for spa weekends that didn't appear on any credit card statements. Elena stopped breathing. I could see her chest freeze. You have no right, she whispered. I have every right, I said. I'm the owner of the estate. And I'm the son you tried to destroy. I opened the folder. The sound of the folder opening was like a gunshot in the quiet room. I pulled out 3 distinct piles of paper and laid them out on the oak table, facing Elena. Let's start with the small stuff, I said, pointing to the first pile. Gambling. I looked at Brad. He shrank back into his chair. Brad, you told Mom you were investing in crypto. That's where the $50,000 went last spring, right? But according to these records from the Bellagio and Caesar's Palace, you have a bit of a blackjack problem. You're currently in debt to a loan shark in Vegas for another 40 grand. Dad paid off the first debt to keep your kneecaps intact, but he kept the receipts. Mom! Brad yelped. I can explain. Elena didn't look at him. She was staring at the second pile. Now the affair, I said. Or should I say affairs? I slid a stack of photos across the table. They weren't graphic, but they were damning. Elena holding hands with her yoga instructor at a hotel in Cabo. Elena kissing a real estate developer in a restaurant booth. Dad knew, I said softly. He knew for 2 years. He sat in that wheelchair, waiting for you to come home, smelling another man's cologne on you, and he never said a word. Do you know how much strength that takes? He didn't care about me. Elena screeched, her voice cracking. He was old. He was sick. I have needs. I gave him the best years of my life. You gave him nothing. I roared, slamming my hand on the table. The sudden noise made Tiffany jump. You gave him loneliness. You gave him betrayal. I took a deep breath. My heart was pounding, but I needed to deliver the final blow. The one Dad had debated even showing me. But cheating is a civil matter, I said, my voice turning icy. This is criminal. I pointed to the third pile. It was an old police report, yellowed with age, from a town in Ohio. Dad's investigator was thorough, I said. He went back a long way. He looked into your first husband, Elena, Charles Vance, the one who died of an accidental overdose of heart medication 15 years ago. Elena's face turned the color of ash. She looked like a ghost. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was ruled accidental, she whispered. The coroner said it was inconclusive, I corrected. But the investigator found the pharmacy records. You refilled his prescription 2 days before he died. Double the dosage. And you were the one administering his meds. Just like you were administering Dad's. The room spun. Mr. Harrison looked grim. He knew this part, of course. He had helped prepare it. Dad had his blood tested, I said. 6 months ago, when he started feeling unusually groggy. He sent a sample to a private lab. Do you want to know what they found? Elena was shaking her head violently. No, you're lying. They found sedatives, Elena. High doses. Stuff he wasn't prescribed. You were drugging him. Maybe to keep him quiet. Maybe to speed things along. We don't know for sure. I leaned in close. But here is the deal. We haven't gone to the district attorney yet. We haven't shown them the toxicology report. We haven't reopened the case in Ohio. Elena looked at me, her eyes wide with terror. For the first time, she wasn't the queen bee. She was a cornered rat. What do you want? She choked out. I want justice, I said. But Dad wanted peace. He didn't want his name in the tabloids alongside a murder trial. He wanted you gone. I'll go, she said quickly. I'll leave. Just don't show that to the police. Oh, you'll do more than leave, I said. Mr. Harrison stepped in then. He slid a single piece of paper toward each of them. This is the official distribution of the will, Harrison said. Remember, the will controls whatever is left that isn't in the trust, which is basically just Robert's personal effects. Elena looked at the paper. $1, she whispered. To my wife Elena, I leave the sum of $1, Harrison read. To my stepson Brad, $1. To my stepdaughter Tiffany, $1. This is to ensure you cannot contest the will by claiming you were forgotten. You weren't forgotten. You were remembered perfectly. Harrison reached into his petty cash box and pulled out 3 crisp $1 bills. He placed them on the table. One in front of Elena, one in front of Brad, one in front of Tiffany. Take it, I said. That's your inheritance. Brad looked at the dollar bill like it was infected. You can't be serious. I have debts. Not my problem, I said. But the house. Tiffany whimpered. Where will we go? I don't know, I said. But you can't stay there. I pulled 3 envelopes from my jacket. These are eviction notices, I said. Served legally right now. Since you are not tenants and have no lease, you are considered guests who have overstayed their welcome. In this state, guests who pose a threat to the property or the owner can be removed immediately. A threat? Elena gasped. We aren't a threat. You drugged the previous owner, I said loud enough for the receptionist outside to hear. I consider that a significant threat to my safety. You have 24 hours, I said. I have a security team meeting you at the house in 30 minutes. They will supervise your packing. You take your clothes, your personal toiletries, and any items you purchased with your own money, if you can prove it. Everything else, the furniture, the art, the jewelry, the cars, stays. It belongs to the trust. 24 hours? Elena screamed. That's impossible. You better start moving then, I said. Because at exactly 1 p.m. tomorrow, I'm changing the locks. And if you are still on the property, you will be arrested for trespassing. Elena looked at the dollar bill. Then she looked at the eviction notice. Then she looked at the PI file that held her darkest secrets. She stood up. She was trembling, but she tried to muster one last shred of dignity. She grabbed her purse. She didn't grab the dollar. You're a monster, she said to me. Robert would be ashamed of you. Robert is the one who wrote the plan, Elena, I said. I'm just the executioner. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life and my father's legacy. Thank you for patiently listening to my story this far. You guys are amazing. Please hit that like button and comment the number 1 below so I know you're riding with me. It really helps more people find this story and lets me know my experience means something to you. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to share the final part of this journey. The door clicked shut behind them, and the silence that rushed back into the room was heavy, but it was a good kind of heavy. It was the feeling of a storm finally breaking. Mr. Harrison let out a long, shuddering breath and slumped back in his chair. He looked 10 years younger than he had an hour ago. Well, he said, picking up the $3 bills they had left on the table. That went exactly as Robert predicted. Did she take the bait? I asked, my hands finally stopping their shaking. She didn't fight the PI report, Harrison nodded. That means it's true. If she was innocent, she would have screamed for the police right then and there. Her silence was a confession. Do we send it to the DA? I asked. This was the part one struggled with. I hated her, but sending her to prison meant dragging Dad's name through a murder investigation. We hold it, Harrison said. It's our insurance policy. If she tries to sue, if she tries to sell a story to the press, if she ever comes within 10 feet of you again. We drop the bomb. It's a sword of Damocles hanging over her head for the rest of her life. I nodded. It was a fitting punishment. Elena, a woman who needed control more than she needed air, would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, knowing we held the power to destroy her with a single phone call. Here, Harrison handed me another document. The final piece. It was a restraining order. Temporary, but with the evidence we had of the drugging. A judge had signed it immediately. If they aren't out in 24 hours, Harrison said, the police will physically remove them. You don't have to lift a finger. I stood up and shook Mr. Harrison's hand. Thank you, Jonathan, for everything, for protecting him when I couldn't. He was my best friend, Zach, Harrison said, his eyes misty. He loved you more than anything. He made a mistake marrying her. He tried to fix it the best way he knew how. I left the office and drove straight to the house. I parked down the street, just watching. I saw a moving truck arrive, not a professional one, but a frantic, rent-by-the-hour van. I saw Brad hauling boxes of designer sneakers out, looking furious. I saw Tiffany crying on the front lawn, holding a bag of clothes. And I saw Elena. She was storming around, shouting at the movers, shouting at her kids. But every time she looked toward the street, toward where my car was parked, she stopped. She looked afraid. I didn't go in. I didn't need to gloat. Dad was right. The victory wasn't in shouting at them. It was in the silence of them disappearing. The next day, at 1:01 p.m., I walked up the driveway. The van was gone. The house was quiet. I keyed in the code. The door swung open. The hallway was empty. They had stripped their personal items, but the house remained. The marble was still cold, but the air felt lighter. I walked into the kitchen. On the counter, there was a single set of keys and a note scrawled in Elena's sharp handwriting. Hope you rot in this big empty house. I crumbled the note and threw it in the trash. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah, my fiancée. I hadn't told the Vances about her. I didn't want them to know anything about my real life. Is it done? Sarah asked. It's done, I said. They're gone. Are you okay? I think so, I said. It feels weird, but good. I'm coming over, she said. And I'm bringing pizza and paint. We are painting over that awful white living room immediately. I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in weeks. Please, I want it yellow, like it used to be. Later that afternoon, a beat-up truck pulled into the driveway. It was Thomas, the gardener. He got out, holding a shovel and a small potted plant. Heard the witch is dead, Thomas grunted, spitting on the ground. Ding dong, I said. Thomas cracked a rare smile. Your dad. He gave me an envelope a few months back. Said I wasn't to open it until the house was clean. I opened it this morning. Thomas handed me a letter. It was in Dad's handwriting. Thomas, if you're reading this, Zach is back in charge. I left you a little something in the trust. Enough to retire, or enough to replant that rose garden you love so much. Take care of my boy. He left me 50 grand, Thomas said, his voice choking up. Old fool. I would have done the roses for free. You're not retiring, are you? I asked. Hell no, Thomas said. Those hybrid tea roses need pruning. And I assume you're gonna fire that expensive landscape company Elena hired. You're hired back, Thomas, I said. Full salary. Double what it was before. Thomas nodded, tipped his cap, and walked off toward the garden shed like he had never left. I walked through the house, room by room. I found the hidden safe in Dad's study. The combination was my birthday. Inside, I didn't find money. I found albums. Photo albums of me and Mom. Elena had hidden them away, claiming they were clutter. But Dad had saved them. I sat on the floor of the study, flipping through pictures of a happy childhood, of a father who laughed, of a mother who hugged me tight. I realized then that the $70 million didn't matter. The house didn't matter. What mattered was that Dad had fought his way back to me. Through the fog of sickness, through the manipulation of a predator, he had formulated a plan to ensure that the son he loved was the one standing in the end. He didn't just leave me a fortune. He left me a vindication. I looked out the window. Sarah's car was pulling up. She was carrying pizza boxes. Thomas was already digging in the garden, preparing the soil for new life. The nightmare of the divorce that never happened, the toxicity of the custody battle over a dying man. It was all over. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the ungrateful son. I was Zachary Sterling. And I was home. 3 months have passed since I walked into that conference room and dropped a nuclear bomb on Elena's world. 3 months since the eviction, the screaming, and the silence that followed. If you could walk into the Sterling estate today, you wouldn't recognize it. And I don't mean structurally. The walls are the same, the roof is the same, but the soul of the house has been transplanted back into the body. The first thing to go was the white furniture. I donated every single piece of Elena's museum collection to a local shelter. It felt poetic. Her overpriced, uncomfortable couches were finally providing comfort to people who actually needed it, something she never would have allowed. Sarah and I spent the first 2 weekends stripping the wallpaper in the dining room. Underneath layers of Elena's grayish, that's gray and beige, and yes, it's as depressing as it sounds. We found the original wainscoting my mother had picked out in the 90s. It was like excavating a lost civilization. But the biggest change wasn't the paint or the furniture. It was the smell. For 6 years, this house smelled like bleach, expensive perfume, and fear. Now, I walked through the front door last Tuesday after a long day at the construction site. The air was thick with the scent of roasted garlic, oregano, and simmering tomatoes. It was the smell of my childhood. "Maria," I called out, dropping my keys in the bowl. "In the kitchen, me hijo," came the voice that used to sing me lullabies. I walked into the kitchen to find Maria, looking 5 years younger than the day she was fired, ruling over the stove. She was humming a tune, stirring a massive pot of sauce. When she saw me, she waved a wooden spoon threateningly. "Go wash your hands, Zachary. You have dirt under your nails. You look like you actually work for a living, unlike that perezoso Brad." I laughed. It was a sound that came easily these days. "Yes, ma'am." Bringing Maria back was the first executive order I signed as the trustee. I didn't just hire her back. I doubled her salary and set up a pension plan that would make a CEO jealous. When I showed up at her small apartment to ask her to come back, we both cried for about 20 minutes. She told me she had been working at a laundromat, barely scraping by. "Your father," she had told me then, wiping her eyes. "He tried to send me checks, Zach, in secret. But Elena," she watched the accounts like a hawk. "He managed to slip me cash a few times through Thomas. But he was scared she would find out and fire Thomas too." Now, watching her command the kitchen, I felt a knot loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was there. The house wasn't just a building anymore. It was a home. Out in the backyard, the transformation was even more dramatic. Thomas, our grump of a gardener, had gone to war with Elena's minimalist landscaping. He had ripped out the gravel Zen garden she installed, which Dad hated because you couldn't walk on it, and replanted the rose beds. I walked out to the patio with a glass of lemonade Maria had shoved into my hand. Thomas was on his knees, covered in mud, pruning a bush that exploded with yellow petals. "Yellow roses," Thomas grunted without looking up. "Your mom's favorite. The golden celebration. That's the breed." "They look amazing, Thomas," I said. "They're tough," he said, patting the soil. "Like your dad. You cut 'em back, you starve 'em, they just hibernate. Wait for the sun. Then they come back stronger." He stood up, wiping his brow. "By the way, a letter came for you. Courier dropped it off. It's from Harrison." I felt a slight tingle of nerves. Even though we had won, the shadow of Elena still loomed large in my mind. I sat on the patio furniture, new, comfortable, weatherproof stuff that you could actually sit on, and tore open the envelope. It wasn't bad news. It was closure. Harrison wrote to update me on the Vance situation, as we called it. Elena was currently living in a 2-bedroom apartment across town. It turned out, without the Sterling credit card to prop her up, her social circle had evaporated faster than a puddle in the desert. But that wasn't the headline. The headline was the insurance investigation. "Dear Zachary," the letter read, "I thought you would like to know that based on the private investigator's file, which we anonymously tipped to the Ohio District Attorney, the insurance company that paid out on Charles Vance's death has reopened the claim. They are suing Elena for fraud. Her assets are frozen. She is currently being represented by a public defender because she cannot afford private counsel." I let out a low whistle. Public defender. For a woman who wouldn't drink wine unless it was at least $100 a bottle, that was a fate worse than jail. And Brad? The letter had a note about him too. Brad Vance was seen working at the valet stand at the country club, the same club he used to be a member of on your father's dime. Poetic justice is rarely this swift, but I thought you'd appreciate the irony. I folded the letter. I didn't feel glee. I didn't feel the urge to drive over there and laugh in their faces. I just felt done. They were the past. The dust in the rearview mirror. Good news? Thomas asked, watching me. The best, I said. Justice. I went back inside and headed to Dad's study. There was one last thing I had to do. One final piece of the puzzle Dad had left for me. In his final letter, the one Harrison read at the office, there was a P.S. I hadn't shared with the group. P.S. Zach, once the house is yours again, check the false bottom in the third drawer of my desk. I hid something there the day Elena asked me where your mother's engagement ring was. I told her I lost it. I didn't want her wearing it. I sat at the massive mahogany desk. I ran my hand over the wood. This was where Dad built his empire. This was where he sat late at night strategizing. I pulled open the third drawer. It was empty, just some old pens and paper clips. But I felt around the edge, just like he taught me when I was a kid playing hide and seek. There was a small latch. Click. The bottom panel popped up. Underneath lay a small velvet box and a thick leather-bound notebook. My hands shook as I opened the box. There it was. The diamond solitaire, simple and elegant, catching the afternoon sun filtering through the window. It was the ring he gave Mom when he had nothing but a dream and a beat-up truck. Elena had wanted a massive rock, something flashy. This ring was pure. I got it, Dad, I whispered. She never touched it. I put the box in my pocket. I knew exactly whose finger that ring belonged on. Sarah had stuck by me when I was just a project manager with daddy issues and a disinherited future. She deserved the symbol of true partnership. Then I picked up the notebook. I expected it to be a diary, or maybe financial codes. But when I opened it, I was confused. It was a ledger, handwritten columns of names, dates, and amounts. Entry: August 2019. Recipient: Isabella Martinez. Amount: $15,000. Purpose: tuition sophomore year. Isabella Martinez? That was Maria's granddaughter. I flipped the page. Entry: January 2020. Recipient: Lucas Miller, Thomas's son. Amount: $12,000. Purpose: small business loan forgiveness. I flipped faster. There were dozens of names. The maid who worked for us for 2 years. The driver Elena fired because he was too chatty. The receptionist at his old office. Dad hadn't just been hiding money from Elena to protect me. He had been running a secret charity operation out of his desk drawer for 6 years. While Elena was buying purses, Dad was paying for college funds, medical bills, and startup loans for the people who actually cared about him. He had been siphoning off his own wealth, bit by bit, to help others, all while playing the role of the submissive, sick old man. Tears pricked my eyes. I had spent so much time being angry that he didn't stand up to Elena, not realizing that he was fighting a different kind of war. He was fighting a guerrilla war of kindness behind enemy lines. I found a note tucked in the back of the ledger. Zach, if you find this, it means you control the trust. You'll see that the trust has a sub-account called the Sterling Education Initiative. It's well-funded. Please keep it going. Elena wanted to be a queen. I preferred to be a neighbor. Don't let the money make you hard, son. Use it to make things soft for the people who have it hard. I closed the book and pressed it to my forehead. I promise, Dad. I choked out. I won't stop. That evening, when Sarah came over, the house was glowing. Maria had lit candles. The table was set with Mom's good china, another thing I recovered from the attic where Elena had banished it. We ate pasta that tasted like love. We laughed with Maria. And afterwards, I took Sarah out to the garden, under the moonlight and the scent of the yellow roses. I didn't do a big speech. I didn't need to. I just pulled out the velvet box. My dad saved this, I said. He saved it for someone who knew the value of loyalty. Will you marry me, Sarah? She didn't ask about the size of the diamond. She didn't ask about the prenup, which Harrison insisted on. but we both knew was just paper. She just hugged me and said yes. As we stood there, holding each other in the garden my father paid to protect, in the house he plotted to save, I realized the transition was complete. The darkness of the last 6 years was gone. It was a brand new day. The wind at Woodlawn Cemetery is always different than anywhere else in the city. It's quieter, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I parked my car, a reliable SUV, not the flashy sports car Brad had coveted, and walked around to open the door for Sarah. She was 6 months pregnant now, glowing in that way that makes you believe in miracles, moving with a careful grace. "You got the flowers?" she asked, adjusting her coat. "Got them," I said, lifting the massive bouquet of yellow roses from the back seat. "Thomas cut them this morning. He threatened to haunt me if I let them wilt before we got here." We walked hand in hand down the winding path. It had been a year since the reading of the will, a year since the lawyer left. When we reached Dad's grave, the sun was just starting to dip below the treeline, casting long golden shadows across the grass. The headstone was simple granite. Robert Sterling, father, husband, builder, and underneath, a quote I had chosen, "Quiet strength moves mountains." I knelt down and placed the roses against the cold stone. I spent a moment cleaning off a few fallen leaves, a ritual of care that felt important. "Hey, Dad," I said softly. "I brought the family." Sarah rested her hand on her bump. "Little Robert is kicking," she smiled. "I think he knows Grandpa is listening." We were naming him Robert. It was the only choice that made sense. I stood up and put my arm around Sarah, looking at the grave. For a long time I had come here with anger. Anger at the cancer, anger at Elena, anger at the time we lost. But today the anger was gone. "You know," I said to Sarah, breaking the silence, "for a long time, I thought inheritance was a dirty word. I watched what it did to Elena. I watched it turn Brad into a monster. I thought money was a poison." "It can be," Sarah said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "But Dad, he showed me it's just a tool," I continued, my mind drifting back to the ledger in the desk. "It's an amplifier. If you're greedy, it makes you a tyrant. But if you're good, if you're like Dad, it makes you a shield." I thought about the last year. We had officially launched the Sterling Foundation. Maria's granddaughter, Isabella, had graduated with honors, debt-free. We had helped 3 other families in the neighborhood fight off predatory developers. And Elena? The last update from Harrison was grim but just. The lawsuit regarding her first husband's insurance policy had drained her. She had settled out of court to avoid prison time, admitting to negligence. She was working as a hostess at a diner 3 towns over. Brad had moved out of state, running from his gambling debts, finally forced to face the world without a safety net. They were living the lives they had earned, and so was I. "He would have loved this," Sarah said, looking around at the peaceful glade. "He would have loved seeing you happy, Zach. That's all he ever wanted. That was the real plan. The money was just the vehicle to get you your freedom back." "Yeah," I nodded. "He was playing 4D chess while we were playing checkers." I looked down at the grave one last time. "We're okay, Dad," I whispered. "The house is full of life again. The garden is blooming. And I'm going to be the kind of father you were. I'm going to protect them. I'm going to teach them that being smart isn't about how much you can take. It's about how much you can give." A breeze rustled through the trees, shaking the leaves of the old oak that stood guard over the plot. It sounded like a chuckle, a deep, familiar chuckle. "Come on," Sarah said, squeezing my hand. "Let's go home. Maria is making lasagna, and she said if we're late, she's giving my portion to Thomas." I smiled. "We can't have that." We walked back to the car, leaving the yellow roses bright against the gray stone. As I drove out of the cemetery gates, I looked in the rearview mirror. I wasn't just leaving a grave. I was leaving the burden of the past. I had my wife, my unborn son, my loyal friends, and a purpose. Dad was right. He had left me everything. Not just the millions, but the roadmap to a life well lived. To everyone listening to this story, Maybe you're dealing with your own Elena. Maybe you feel like you're being pushed out, unheard, or undervalued. Maybe you're waiting for justice that feels like it's never going to come. Take it from me, Zachary Sterling. Sometimes you have to play the long game. Sometimes you have to be quiet so you can hear the truth. And sometimes the best revenge isn't screaming and shouting. It's living a good life, protecting the people you love, and letting the trash take itself out. Hold the line, trust your gut, and never, ever underestimate the power of a quiet man with a plan. Thank you for walking this road with me. It's been a wild ride, from the lawyer's office to the cemetery, but I'm glad I didn't have to do it alone. If this story meant something to you, if you believe that good eventually triumphs over greed, do me a favor one last time. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel so we can keep building this community, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Zachary. This was my story. And now I'm going home to eat lasagna with my family. Stay safe, everyone.